essentially a personal training apprenticeship program, with
Mm-hmm.
the final stage being a legitimate job. You know, we have guys that are making up to like 70K a year that were like in and out of jail for their whole life until getting their
Wow.
certification with us. So, you know, the opportunity is there for those that that really put the time in. You know, there's some people that are really like that. They're trying to really make some money for a living. And then, like I mentioned earlier, some just need the support of our organization. It could be getting rides somewhere, or, you know, getting a license or opening a bank account or something like that. So
Yeah.
there's a big spectrum.
This is so interesting. I actually, when I first came on your work, your stuff, I assumed that it was that you were essentially working with people who needed support as athletes, and this idea of this apprenticeship model is just really a cool
Yeah.
idea.
So most of our trainers are athletes. Like
They're also athletes. Got you.
Well, it's just because, you know, you got kids growing up, you know, in the inner city of Boston. That doesn't mean you're an athlete, but sometimes that's kind of like a lot of the trainers that we have. That was like their, you know, their safe haven growing up.
Was in sports, yeah.
In sports, yeah, and you know, life circumstances prevented them from actually playing in, you know, any structured way beyond, like, you know, middle school, I don't think. But you know, a couple of our trainers are some very legitimate athletes, and I think those are, you know, those people that not rely, but those that are connected to movement and competition or whatever it is. You know, if there's not sports and you're locked up, there's at least the weight room. And that weight room is like that. For a lot of our guys, they describe it as the, you know, kind of like their sanctuary, or their safe place where they can just work on what they're doing. Everything else kind of fades away, and they're getting stronger and challenging themselves. So
there's something
that's
about
where
that for sure.
Yeah, that's where a lot of it starts. But we provide a way to turn it into money for them, essentially.
That's so interesting.
They know how to work out, but they don't necessarily know how to tell someone else how to work out.
Right.
Which is what people would pay you for, you know what I'm saying? So
right.
Really the goal of the organization is to create, at its heart, there's bigger picture goals too, but at its heart, the goal is to really, you know, have our guys know a skill that they can turn into income.
Yeah.
So, you know, because there's a lot of nonprofits out there that are super necessary and great and do amazing things. But our guys that we work with, and we can go more into the background, but they need money like fast in order to stay alive and out of jail.
Tell us more about the sort of people that you working with, who your sort of target impact is.
Yeah, so the stats that we kind of that best explain it is in most cities, actually, but definitely in Boston, it's about 1% of the population that's driving 50% of gun violence. So we're talking like, you know, small social groups throughout Boston, you know, different streets. It's not like territory here and there. It's basically like the way Boston works. There's different streets. You know, obviously these are low income neighborhoods where people growing up feel that in order to survive, kind of have to join these groups of you know, peers, if you will, to stay alive, because there's such a lack of resources. So that's what turns into street violence. And so that 1% are the people that we work with. So we're talking like 400 to 500 people, typically, you know, the ages typically ages like 16 to 30. But, sadly, a lot of these kids are witnessing gun violence, as little as young as the age of like 10 to 12.
Right.
And you could imagine if you witness that at that age, you're going to be scared, right? So that's where a lot of the mentality of like protection and finding a group, people that live near you that you can really bond with and grow up with. And so that 1%, those 400 to 500, we know now from working with them are the same as the kids I grew up with in a wealthy suburb, just with a way more challenging circumstances from the jump, just from being born where they're born with, the color skin that they're born with. So what we try to do is recognize that humanity, the commonplace, that connection that we all have. And all it takes is, for a lot of the students that we work with, is just providing support and resources. The students that we work with are in the neighborhoods in Boston that you're typically told not to go into. And that's one of the stigmas that we're trying to break. The amount of, there's only like 3% of the streets in Boston have ever had any violence on them. But people want to label whole neighborhoods as dangerous.
Course,
and this violence is happening between social groups. It's not like random. You go in there, you're not really in that much danger.
Right.
It's more
targeted than that. Is that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the way that it works is kind of like, this group has a problem with that group, and they see someone from that group who did something, and it's really like, it can seem like trivial stuff on the outside.
Is that like direct gang affiliation from your experience, or is it not quite as explicit as that?
Yeah, it's in Boston.
Sometimes
it's in Boston. It's not like technically like gang. Like, we're not talking like, we're not talking about like the Bloods and the Crips, like you see on in movies or something. It's really just like streets that you grew up on. And those streets kind of create little pockets of, kids that essentially grow up together, and it kind of gets passed down the same way, the same way all sorts of generational stuff gets passed down. But really, the more kids that we can bring into the gym, because really what it comes down to is that they need more money to provide food for siblings themselves. In some cases, parents, parents could be a single parent, or it could be have mental health or physical health issues. And it could, and sometimes, unfortunately, it falls on, the 16 to 24-year-old, that lives in that neighborhood, and you get in trouble early. It's hard. The sooner you have a record, the harder it is to get a legitimate job, and it's kind of like this snowball effect. So what we're trying to do is extract those kids and give a, like, look, hey, listen, we want to support you. We don't give a shit what you are doing when you leave this gym. We want to support you when you're here, and we want to help you not have to go back to that.
It's so important. If I'm hearing you right, it's like you're trying to get in before the snowball really can build too much. And I have to address this for people. What's that?
We're trying sometimes. Sometimes we have trainers who are come out of a 10-year sentence, but they've been thinking about ICW since they heard about it. And so they know if they connect with us right when they get out, they have less of a chance of getting caught up.
And I need everyone who might be listening to hear this, because I think it's, we're in Chicago. That's our home base now. We're started out east, but we're in Chicago now. And, there's all sorts of, I know there will be skeptics who think that money is not the solution to the problem of crime. And the reason is, and actually, believe it or not, that's pretty well documented in the research. Like people will, some of the worst high schools in Chicago are some of the most well-funded through government grants and all sorts of different initiatives. And I would say that it's more complex than that. It's not just dollars and outcomes as a direct alignment. And I think what you're identifying is something that for me has really come to the forefront in this quarantine moment. I don't think people recognize just how important you mentioned like just the circumstances and maybe as at 17, 18, you're a provider, all of a sudden. I don't think people really recognize, at least those who are judging might not recognize, that you don't know what you would do when you're hungry until you're actually hungry. You know what I mean? And I say this, we say this to groups across the spectrum, from groups who really need support to very privileged groups. Think back to the last time you were like starving. And we say it almost jokingly, because like you miss lunch and you're like, oh, I'm starving, I can't wait for dinner. Well, until
your whole mood changes.
Exactly. Hunger is a real
and that's
thing.
just at the beginning,
And that's just at the start. And because you're hungry because you didn't get lunch, whatever, your mood changes, your behaviors change. Think about this. We ask this of kids all the time. When was the last time that you were just like rude or short with a parent at the dinner table or something like that? Aren't those the people that you like theoretically love the most, kind of? Why are you being mean to them? Well, there's a whole host of things going on. One of them, that you might be tired and cranky from a long day, whatever. Exaggerate that and say that you're not hungry because you missed lunch, but you're actually freaking hungry. You've got a little sister to feed, hypothetically, or whatever it might be. I think too often people sit outside of this and sort of admonish or judge behaviors that are coming from circumstances that you only read about. If you're actually starving, the priority of your body and mind is to get food. And it's not always going to be as easy as like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, go get a job and to provide whatever. So I'm really intrigued by this, because what it sounds like is you're not just like throwing around free cash. You're like, if you said you're paying people to begin the process, to get educated, to ultimately then like start their own lives as trainers. Is that
exactly? Yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean, you've picked up some really complex issues that even people who have been our clients for a long time don't necessarily understand. So like, we have clients that have been around for, a lot of people want to, who give us suggestions on what to do with our organization. They say, oh, you should have an education component, or, more people should be graduating, or there should be more job skill development. And we have to remind people all the time that where the starting point is literally not getting shot, going home and eating that day. And these are not situations they've ended up in because of like horrible decisions. It's because when you have two choices that are both horrible,
right,
then you're going to choose a bad one. So
well, think about
that's
just even
the starting point.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned that you talked about the cycle, like once you have a record, things become harder. I'm just picturing like, I'm going to be totally open. I'm picturing things that like, I'm very proud of the work that we do, that you guys are doing, but if you had caught me at 14 and put me in a position where I was starving, I'm exactly the same as every other human being. And if the question is starve or maybe steal a sandwich, and I'm not talking about like being kind of hungry. About,
right. Like the constant feeling.
Yeah. And how do you, to not recognize that seems like a flaw.
But so that's a good segue into like the power of our program, because I know I just mentioned some people still don't understand that concept of like desperation, but what it does is you put someone like you and I, who we got to use sports as a great tool, for me at least, like it was life lessons, and it was coaches that I look back on and I'm grateful for and all that. But what it does is it puts people like us in front of our trainers, and then they get to know each other at that that level of just person to person. And that's not the easiest thing to scale. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to solve racism or anything, but it at least is going to start that conversation of, this is what and I'm speaking as if I'm the trainer, but like, this was my life growing up. And it doesn't like make our clients feel bad. It makes them admire them and respect how far they've come just to be their trainer. And then it also makes them look kind of internally, like, how can I, having not grown up like that and had a big network of people, how can I help kind of break the cycle that people like my trainer are going through.
Right. And if they want to, I'm sure there are some people who don't. And I think it might be interesting. We might share this with our organization. Sometimes it's really hard to quantify the impact, because if you put 5 awesome trainers with 5 great stories over 50 clients over the course of a week, I don't know what the numbers are, but hypothetically, you don't know what some of the outcomes will be, but every now and then, I bet you someone with means will really, a story will really resonate with them. And, they'll have a first person experience with someone that changes the trajectory of their life too. And
we get that all the time. We get that feedback all the time. And I will say, I had a thought, but I lost. You were talking about the impact. So it is really hard to put it into, because, the 6 trainers we have on staff right now, I'm not saying they've saved their own lives, but like ICW has been there to like support them save their lives.
Right.
But what we do keep track of is, recidivism. So how many of our students who have come to us go back, and it's about the national average is about every 2 out of 3 people that's been incarcerated ends up going back. And we've actually flipped that and then some. So we've kept 85% out of recidivism. So
that's awesome.
8 or 9 out of 10 students that work with us don't go back.
That's amazing.
And then the other, so I don't know how that plays into the bigger statistics, but we know that the people that we work with at least are less likely to go back. And then we also track it by the amount of money that we save society, essentially. So in other words, it's an ROI, to put it in business terms. So every dollar donated or spent with ICW has a societal return of 6.5 x, and that's tallied by
how do you get that?
About how much it takes to put someone in prison, hold them in prison, combined with that's actually the conservative estimate, is basically by keeping someone out of jail. Then there's a more holistic approach where you start to get into like how much street violence actually costs taxpayers.
Oh geez,
how much the like health insurance gets increased with all the violence. There's a whole slew of factors that go into it, where if that wasn't the case, we could put that money into much more important things and save lives. So the business, more the companies and the business people that we work with like to see that.
What did you say that number was again? It's over $6.
6.5. Yeah. So every dollar spent, turns into 6.5 for the community, essentially.
Yeah.
And I can send you some of those calculations and whatnot. But when you take into account the cost of a homicide, the cost of the health insurance system, the number actually is a lot bigger. But we just give the more conservative one just to be more safe.
It makes sense, and what a cool way to What a cool figure to put out there when, like, to donors. That's smart.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
I like it. Do you, so you guys have been around for how long? How long has the organization been around?
So 2020 is our 10th year. This is my, I've been around for 3, but 2010, it kind of just started as our founder working out of like a garage with dudes that he met through his AmeriCorps program. And it's evolved to what it is now through kind of just starting like that, and then renting space out of like a CrossFit for a couple of years, and then I'm not sure what year it was that we had that they moved into Dorchester, but I think Dorchester has been around for at least like 8 years, and then the Kendall Square location, which the Kendall Square location is more of like a social enterprise. Like if you went in there, you know, besides the music that's being played and you know, the casual atmosphere, you wouldn't know it was a nonprofit. We try to keep it like that. Like it's really just a place of it's a personal training studio.
And is that your own spot? Do you guys own that?
Oops, sorry. We rent it out, but
I'm trying to picture it. Is it part of MIT or in that little like
really close? Do you know the Cambridge Side Galleria?
Yeah. Is that north of MIT? Am I picturing that right?
I'm terrible with like directions, but so so if you were, let's see, what's the best way to put it? How familiar are you with not Central, with Kendall Square?
Less with Kendall, but here's how I would picture it. If there's like the river, there's MIT.
We're really close to the river, like
closer to the river than to the.
Yeah. So if you have MIT on the river, right?
Yeah.
Then you would go towards Boston, towards downtown. So like,
gotcha.
You know, the Longfellow Bridge that goes over that. We're you know, 1/10 of a mile from that bridge.
Very cool.
Yeah, pretty close to the water, but walking distance to both the Green Line and the Red Line.
That's awesome.
It's a great location for a gym, and there's not that many. There's not really that many competitors in the area either. It's more about us getting the word out without, you know, with a nonprofit marketing budget.
Oh, totally. Do you do things other than Olympic weightlifting, or like what sort of training do you all offer?
Yeah, it kind of started as the name is really more about the origin. It really started with our founder, John. He was really big into Olympic lifting. After college, he played soccer in college and then got really into Olympic lifting. And basically, like, that was what he was doing with the young people that he was meeting through his program, was teaching Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
And it's always kind of been like a staple of what we teach our trainers, but it's not that frequent. I would say maybe like 10% of our clients, and we probably have like 120 clients right now. So maybe like, you know, 12 to 15 actually implement Olympic lifts into their program. But
gotcha.
All the trainers are into it. And it's kind of like more of the origin, but our personal training, you know, is just based off of the collaborative effort between the coaches that created the certification, but you know, heavy emphasis on injury prevention. You know, a lot of single leg. A lot of our clients are. We actually have a lot of clients that are on the older side that are just trying to like stay functional, or had some sort of a bad injury in the past and just trying to not let that you know, not let that get worse and worse, but actually go the other way. So yeah, it's pretty traditional personal training in the fact that like we're going with what people need. But you know, the emphasis is on functionality and injury prevention, really.
Do you ever have I'm thinking out loud right now. Do you ever have do you work with high school athletes very much?
I wouldn't say very much, but yeah.
There's some connection there.
Yeah, especially in the summer, we'll just get like an influx of clients,
Yeah.
and that's always really a really cool thing because our trainers, you know, I'm thinking we have a couple of trainers that are like legit athletes that, you know, given different circumstances growing up, for sure would have played. One of our trainers, Angel, was like ready to go to BC as a football player.
Yeah.
You know, and then life circumstances happened and prevented that. And so to see them get to train athletes, I know that they love it. I know it means a lot to them because
Sure.
they're really like passing on the knowledge that they gained over the years to those that are still like, you know, have a shot at taking it wherever they want to take it.
Totally. Do you think, could you, for someone who'd never come across it before, can you think of a case, whether it's like one of your trainers or somebody you work with, whatever it might be, that really kind of highlights the power of what you all do? Because I think to me, it makes immediate sense to me, you know, and that's why I was so excited to reach out. It's, you know, we talked about in our, when we spoke before, about how, like, what an incredible learning environment the weight room is. People say sports teach life lessons, and that's like, it's sometimes true, sometimes not true in the way we intend it to be. You know, we think you got to be explicit about it, but man, the weight room has, you know, there's not the stress and strain of performing on like a Friday night under the lights. There's, it's much longer. Like an off season is 9 months to compare to an in season it's 3 months. Like, you know, so much of our work has begun to focus on the weight room. So I see it immediately and it excites me immediately. What is, and you don't have to name any names, but like what's like a case study that just jumps off for you that kind of highlights the power of it?
Yeah, man, there's so many, just because I can think of like, all I have to do is think of a trainer and then I think of a few of their clients that are really like committed, and then you know, there's always a story there. But off the top of my head, you know, we have a trainer who, he's actually one of the guys I mentioned on the older side. Now I say older, I just mean like 36 compared to our younger kids. But, you know, he was in and out. He's become one of my good friends, but he was in and out his whole life.
In and out of prison for people who.
Sorry.
Yeah,
in and out of prison all life, and kind of knew about ICW. Had friends that have been through the program, and his most recent sentence was 5 years, and he has a son who he had like right before he went in that last time. So like he was devastated to go back, and really was like committed to having that not happen again, so he could be there for his son. And I think the best part about his story is that now he's been a trainer with ICW for about 2, maybe 3 years, and it's the longest he's ever been out of prison consecutively as a 36-year-old man. So one, that's like a simple win that he's proud of. But then if you get it deeper into like the connections he's made with some of his clients, one of the great examples is a young woman that he trains. You know, you would never, she's like a MIT student, an ultimate Frisbee, like really competitive ultimate Frisbee player.
Yeah.
You know, they're from completely different backgrounds, different age. She's younger, but they just like hit it off, and so much so that she was playing in a like national ultimate Frisbee like championship out in San Diego, and she invited him to go watch it. So
oh wow, did he fly out?
He didn't even tell us about it, and all of a sudden he's posting pictures like out in San Diego, and I think they're actually doing an interview together. Like it's a really cool client trainer relationship. And not only that, but his son is like, before COVID, like his son was a constant face in the gym, just like a really funny, cute little kid that was always running around and lightening the mood in the gym. you know, and so when you think about like that seems like, you know, that's just humans connecting, right?
Right,
But you
right.
think about kind of the bigger picture, the things that work, the systems that work against that connection happening. It
Mm,
really, you kind of have to think about how powerful that really is, that it is the weight room that brought them together like that. Because uh, if you look at him from a media maybe or a statistic, you know, you don't see him as a
hmm.
trainer of or a friend of this young woman. You see him as, you know, a statistic of someone that went to jail, of someone who's been shot, of someone who was in a gang or whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, and it really, when we look at it like that, it really doesn't do humanity justice, in my opinion. You know, because we're all individuals, and to look at someone like him as a statistic or something like that is never going to lead to a solution where we don't have people shooting each other. You know what I mean? In these communities, um, or stealing or selling drug, whatever it is. Like,
Right.
we're not going to solve that by like judging or labeling or, but we are going to solve it by getting to know those people, what they need, just listening to why they've ended up where they've ended up. You know, they'll be the first to tell you they've made mistakes. Um, but like I said, it's really about what resources or what help did you have after making those mistakes. And most of our trainers have had very little, until we've kind of facilitated more networks for them.
It's interesting. So we try to filter a lot of the way that we approach, say, a new environment, a new team, a new program, a new organization like yours, whatever it might be. We always look, we try to diagnose what people need. We filter it through 3 filters. This is just one of our frameworks: understanding, motivation, and access. So what we've noticed, maybe this would hold true to that story and a lot of the others, is um, if I don't think it's a lack of understanding all the time. It's not like someone doesn't know that stealing is wrong. You know,
Right,
that's not the issue. And
right,
even motivation, they may not have a strong motivation to do, you know, to steal. I'm using a hypothetical. I'm envisioning myself as a teen. The motivation might not be to steal. The motivation is probably somewhere else. It's more likely that to cure this problem of hunger or
right,
whatever it might be.
right.
But then you bring up the access component, and the thing that you just mentioned hit another access point that's always been really important to us in the way that we approach things. So you mentioned there's a financial access. Like, you've got to be able to solve base level financial concerns. You've got to eat, you need a roof over your head, you've got to feel safe, whatever. But you
Mm-hmm.
also, another access concern that I think goes overlooked way too often because it can't be turned into a statistic, is human connection. You know, like, it's not just, okay, so you can eat, you have a roof over your head, whatever, you know, but are you connected to other human beings?
Right,
It's such an absolute, you know, there are some folks out there who might be introverts that say it's not as important as it is. Well, every human craves connection to other humans, and, you know, and you can sort of toggle that. You can, you know, sometimes you want more, sometimes you just want to, you know, your own space. Irrelevant,
right,
because
right.
all human beings were created with a certain set of similarities, and we are a communal species. So even just that thing. So you're
Right.
identifying. If I'm hearing this right, you have identified a core population that is from the population within Boston that is, what did you say, 1% responsible for
Yeah.
50%? Okay.
Yep.
And you've found something that they really like, sports, um, the weight room, training, all these things. And not
Yep.
only are you welcoming those people into that space and creating human connections, but you're also training them to, you're putting dollars in people's pockets, but also training them to put dollars in their own pockets. Like, dude, I'm saying this all out loud for everyone because it strikes, you know, from the outside, it's like, oh, people are weightlifting with people who've been to jail. Okay.
Right.
From the outside.
Right.
But to really understand all these important boxes that are being checked through the work that you all are doing, like, only then could you really understand, um, the
Yeah.
depth of it.
Yeah. No, it's great to hear you like reframe it in your own words like that, because I love, yeah, it's great that that you can pick up all that on this conversation, but it's really true. It's one thing that we harp on. Our students have immediate needs, like you mentioned, so we try to help that. But then we also, okay, their immediate needs are solved. They still have a record. They still have trouble getting access to a license or a bank account, or things that a lot of us take for granted.
Totally.
So how do we help them with that going forward once they're stable? And what the personal training does is not just the income, but you and I know, how do you get jobs? It's like, it's your network, it's your connection. So, we have trainers with records, long records that, I've had them going in and out of prison. But if you know someone that trusts you and cares about you, and they have the power to help you get a job, then you'll probably get that job, and you'll get an opportunity that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And that's because of the training. So as we kind of grow as an organization, that's where we've shifted. We want people to understand that as much as the eating, because of the training. We want them to understand that the training is also giving them connections to, we have clients that are like C-level at Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
There's a pause for my complaining baby.
If your baby wants to jump on, they need to contribute.
She's a little busy right now. But yeah, so we have these clients, and like the coolest thing about that, and they might not even understand all these complex things that we're talking about, but they care about that trainer. And so they don't care what their rap sheet is or whatnot. They just want to see that person succeed because they've helped them get in shape and they've heard and they've gotten to know them over the last few years. So regardless of how much they understand systemic racism or how gun violence manifests itself in a city, that doesn't even matter, because they just want to help that person get a job, and they trust them. Once they make that connection for them, they trust them that they will, give it their best shot at keeping that job.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we are trying to harp on it, is we're trying to really push that part of our story, because it's just as important.
No doubt.
Because it shows you, it's not just, this isolation of different neighborhoods is not just like resulting in violence and trauma and pain. It's also preventing anyone from gaining the networks they need to get out of it. That's the kind of like evil part of the whole system. And, you can't really put a face to it, but those are the wheels, and we're trying to just break those by connecting people outside of those neighborhoods who can share their network. But they're not going to do that to a stranger, right? Which is understandable. It's understandable regardless of what the person's background is. You need to know someone a little bit. And so the training is just like an excuse to make that connection between two people. And, at the same time, they're getting fit for a reasonable price. So it's it's why the model gets a lot of attention and why it's successful. But we're kind of always adapting and evolving to change the bigger picture mentality of like what actually leads to the need for an organization like ours. And we would love to inspire more organizations to have that kind of win-win mentality of not just philanthropy or charity, but things that are sustainable going forward.
The relationship building is the key. I think I'm trying to filter sort of like, we're a relatively young organization, the Good Athlete Project. We've only been around for 3 or 4 years. And one thing that has really jumped out from my experience, I know the people that we work with would say the same, is it's the relationships. It's not It's relationships that matter most and have created the biggest change and ultimately the biggest impact. You can, because we've gone through this whole dilemma of like, how do we quantify exactly what it is that we do? So if you can move test scores, say if it's an academic intervention, great. If you can, positively influence self-reports or how healthy people are being on some, those are all good and fine. And I think sometimes people need to hear those. And I think there's something good in just sort of self-checking to see if you're having an impact. But the things that like cannot be put on paper other than maybe formats like this, people talking and sharing stories, like that's where the biggest moves are happening, like connecting human beings and what erupts organically from good human beings connecting over something they share an interest in, again, is unquantifiable. And I don't know about you, but some of the I've gotten in, I feel like, just the table being set for networking and the way that you're describing it, I've gotten into some pretty deep conversations in the weight room before. Like some of my closest friends from back in the day are just, you hang out, you're spending an hour together.
Yeah.
Just
where
talking.
Where else do you have an hour, in this day and age?
Right.
There's not too many opportunities to just have a straight hour where you're just talking to someone while, obviously you're working out too, but like you're really just getting to know that person. You got nowhere to go. Like you're
right.
with that person for an hour.
We're doing this.
Some people are quieter than others, and some trainers are quieter than others. Some clients.
Sure.
But regardless, like, you're getting to know that person either way.
No doubt.
And it's really powerful. And then, where we also like to what we also like to emphasize with people that we are explaining our program to is that it's not just that relationship, but we are proud of the fact that it kind of flips that power dynamic. So you have like a CEO of a tech startup, but now the person who has been in and out of prison the whole day is the expert, teaching him how to lift successfully or safely. And that power shift really, in our experience and the feedback that we get from our clients, changes their lives. You know what I mean? Because they really learn from the trainer, not just fitness stuff, but what they've been through, overcome, and you would be amazed how positive the attitudes are of our trainers, despite, society basically like leaving them for dead. So if that doesn't, motivate you as a client, then like you might need a little more help. But
it's amazing. What would you say if you had to name some of the if we talk about like character outcomes, just like broadly, the science of studying character, what would you say? And I think a big part of this conversation is identifying that probably this can't be explicitly named, but like, what are the big gains you see people making? So say someone's with you for a year or two, what are some of the most notable changes in that person, as far as you can tell?
So sorry, I'm just on the move here. So
sure.
You're saying, so I hate to be like depends, but it kind of depends on where we're starting from, So like you said, if we're starting from trying to survive and eat every day, then some of the changes that we're looking for over a year or two is like that they trust us as an organization, that they trust our staff members, that they can open up and ask for help. That's a big barrier.
Huge.
That our students, because asking for help when no one's really like offered you help your whole life can be a really hard thing. Not to mention, when you're trying to be strong and self-reliant or whatnot, it's hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of our relationship building with new, younger students, because if you don't have that trust, and if they can't ask for help or tell you what they need, then we can't help them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are
It's,
sometimes guys that'll come to the gym and just lift without saying that much for a whole year, and then all of a
mhm.
sudden that trust, or they mature a little bit, or something happens with that trust, and then all of a sudden we know exactly how to help them because they've opened up.
Isn't
And
that
then
interesting that it seems so obvious, but it's just, we forget that it's just not a natural thing. So you need support.
yeah,
Okay, find it. Sometimes you just got to ask for it. Well, if without trust, to expect that, that's a
right,
miss in the understanding of how human beings work, probably.
right. And a lot of nonprofits, um, you know, won't be patient in that phase. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like
right.
if they're not
Totally.
showing, and so like our students, will have things lined up, or meetings or sessions or whatever, and some of the younger guys will like not show up. And one of our questions, like when we interview people, what are you going to do if someone said that they need a ride and you go to pick them up, and 3 days in a row they ask for that ride, but they don't come out of their house to come to the gym? And the answer that we're looking for is that, like, we reach out like, hey, I missed you yesterday picking you up, like, and then try again the next day, because you don't know what's preventing that person from not coming to the gym that day. To even if it's us offering to pay them to do a certification, you don't know what's preventing them to do that. And a lot of nonprofits would give up on that person, saying, oh, you didn't come 3 times and we can't help you anymore. But we understand that there's a lot more at play typically with the students that we're dealing with. So
Can I share a quick story on that? Because that really resonated with me. There's this divide between, like, you want to hold people accountable, but you want to understand people, and you can't make assumptions. And that is, I think, from a coaching perspective, such an important and challenging skill, because yes, of course you want to hold people accountable. You grow through that. But hold people accountable to a standard that makes sense based on their context, not some cut and paste version of accountability. And we lost one of our, not in any sort of dramatic way, but one of our volunteers in the Good Athlete Project essentially walked away because they were getting upset that we weren't holding one of the groups that we partner with, which has a lot of students from a part of the city that really does need a lot of support. That we weren't holding them to a tough enough standard, that person walked away, and it's no problem, whatever. Everyone's got their own trajectory in terms of how long it takes them to fully understand the world, and none of us ever get it. But it really highlighted something to me, because there was some frustrations in our involvement with this group that we had partnered with, and they were legitimate. They were like, not all of this is very professional, and we should be able to expect X, Y, and Z. But my inclination was always to go a little slower and try to dig a little deeper, to figure out, not to point fingers at problems, which is super freaking easy. Anyone can just point a finger at a problem, but to figure out what was behind the problem to ultimately get beyond it. That's the hard work. Anyway,
no, you nailed something that both we emphasize and we struggle with. So we emphasize it at the beginning, like the story that I just told, because that's happened to me. I've gone to some of those neighborhoods you're not supposed to go into, quote unquote, day after day, and the person just doesn't come out. I'm supposed to bring them to the gym, to work on their certification, and they just don't come. And that really goes to what you just said of, like, you have to understand the context, and every person's situation is different, and that our role isn't to, like, get mad at them not coming out. Our role is to keep offering them the ride, because we have enough people giving up on them in society. But then you get to our Kendall Square facility, where we're trying to operate as close to a for-profit model as possible. And it's very real that even though our students might seem very stable and professional, that stuff that you grew up with, like, that doesn't just like go away because you have a stable job. Like,
Right.
that still shows up in a lot of different ways, both, PTSD, family might still be, caught up in stuff that kind of haunted you for your childhood. There's a lot of ways where it can still show up no matter how old you are.
Right.
And so that's when we have the challenge, because you have guys that we're trying to hold to a professional standard, while still taking into account the background that they have and the trauma that they've been inflicted upon them. And we always are going back and forth, and I probably flip-flop a lot. It's like, where do we take the hard stand on, professional policies of, that an Equinox would, would probably fire you for or whatnot.
Yeah.
And the answer is usually case by case. So it's hard for us to really have like,
I know, it is hard.
It's like really personal. Some guys, they might even have hip health issues or even mental health issues that you also have to take into consideration. So we struggle with that. At the beginning, it's very clear. It's like, you are always just supporting them until they stop answering you for, we don't have a set time, but until they just like stop answering for a long time, hit them back up in a few months. But the trainers that are like employees, that's a harder line to find, as far as accountability versus understanding context.
Without a doubt,
there's no answer.
There isn't. That's why. So a little more insight into our work. Like we do a lot of professional development work. So we work with like the teams, like the professionals. We host workshops. We do with certain organizations, fairly in-depth consulting, and it's like really fun stuff. But one of the things that we always this is like one of our taglines. We always come back to it. Does your behavior match your goal? And it's this sort of filter. It's this cornerstone principle that, dude, we've worked with youth athletes to Olympians to coaches to private businesses, all of these things. No matter who you are, eventually over the course of our time together, we get to that question. And I'm telling you, by person, everyone gets at least mildly uncomfortable confronting that question. Does your behavior match your goal? Because there's a handful of components to it. One is the accountability idea, the personal accountability, that you've got to recognize that this is your behavior. The liberating part of that is you don't have to dictate your circumstances. You only have to own your behavior within them. And then I think the thing that throws a lot of people off is the your goal part. So if there was someone who's just up there, they're all business, they might listen to this and say, well, no, there's got to be an accountability standard for all the employees who are doing, this is when you show this, there is a standard of professionalism within our business. Fine, fair enough. And if you're trying to scale a large gym, that's absolutely correct. And you can, and if they don't meet the standard, it's plug and play, next one up. But if you're trying to have an impact on a human life in a different sort of way, this is where people toe the line between, yes, you have to operate as like a for-profit, like a nonprofit is a business, of course. But the does your behavior match your goal question is what changes ultimately. Because the goal is, do we want to be a fully functioning professional business that has great outcomes and changes people's lives through training? But also, probably part of the goal is to build relationships and get a better understanding of the complexity of this human, and ultimately fulfill our mission. So that's where like people like you, and I don't know if John, the founder, is still how involved but all these people, that's really, that, I mean, that's where the art of it comes in, kind of.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah, you hit it spot on. That's real. And just to add to that, like when, if there's some line of accountability that our trainers aren't living up to,
yeah,
you bring it up to them as a human, and they'll be the first to admit that they didn't do X. That's
right.
the beauty of some of the guys that we work with, that when you grow up without any privilege, you're a little more honest about, like, all right, I fucked that up, or I did that, or I didn't do that. There's very little excuses from our trainers. It's, that doesn't necessarily mean that it gets fixed right away, but if we bring it to them in an honest, open, care about them way, they'll acknowledge anything that they've done wrong. They own it, and that's really where it starts. That's how you growth. Now, it might take a while, but that's the starting point of, like, making progress. So
sure.
We're always balancing on that, and we have different employees that have different along that spectrum of accountability. Like, John is probably on the very beginning of it. Like, his whole thing is, more chances, no punishments as far as, like, work punishments. He doesn't want to take any money from our trainers. But then, you have some coaches sometimes they're like, that's great, but
right.
you're making the personal training goals of our gym as a whole harder to achieve, if you don't take that stance. And I'm not taking a side in this conversation. Sure. I'm just saying, like, you have people that both have the trainer's best interest in mind, with opposing
totally
views. And really what it comes down to is kind of like what you said, is just talking to that person and being real about, what they're going to have to do to get where they want to be.
Right. Right, totally. And it sounds like probably just the thresholds for professionalism in the model that you have set up are just different. That's all. Like, I would imagine, you can't tell your clients to go F off every day. Eventually that's crossed the threshold. The range might be bigger, but of course there's some kind of line, and figuring that out.
And there's definitely been thresholds crossed, and we have those conversations, and we're proud to say that even when that happens, we still find a way to stay in touch. It just might not be a good fit to be a trainer at that location or at that time.
That happens, right?
But like I said, they're the first to agree with it and want to do better in the future. But you're right. You've grasped a lot of the complex things quickly. So it's been great to kind of bounce things back and forth with you.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed this, man. I think I'll say just publicly thanks for the work that you and your organization are doing. I think we need to see more of it. Yeah, talk to me.
You're in Chicago.
Yes, sir.
So we work with BCG. We teach classes for them in person, and then now it's been virtually. And the pandemic has kind of opened up opportunities to work with different offices of the companies that we're already with. And Chicago actually asked us if we had they want to hire us to run their group sessions, but they said it would be an easier pitch to their higher ups, if there was some connection with Chicago. So I don't know, maybe you're the person that introduces me to the person that finds it, but we would love to find someone in Chicago that fits the same criteria as the people that we work with in Boston, which I know it's a way bigger city. So I know there's probably, even more guys that could use that. So maybe there's a bigger pool of people that are interested in fitness to choose from. But maybe just to throw that in your back of your mind as, like, someone that fits the criteria of what I've explained to you as far as who we teach to be trainers. Obviously, they have to have some interest in fitness. Yeah. And essentially what we would do is we would put them through virtually that certification, and then they could lead the BCG Chicago workouts and get paid decently for it.
Let me
basically like a virtual version where we our student is from Chicago, not, you know, Dorchester or Rockford.
I'm really interested in that.
Yeah,
I think
so
that would
about
fit.
That.
That'd be something. Let's talk about it. If you can hang back just for like even 2 seconds after this, I think we should talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So then what I'll say is, you're the man. Thanks for all that you're doing. You know, that's what it is. I hope people see this. Like I say it over and over and over again, but there is just something so clear about the weight room as a learning environment. If we sort of pull back from whatever preconceptions we might have surrounding the weight room and training and fitness, really see it for what it is, which is like you're fully embodied, you're self-aware, you're making connections, you're meeting people. Like it has potential to be a really cool environment.
Yeah,
you all are maximizing
setting goals, challenging yourself,
100%. Goal-directed behavior. You got to follow through. You're not going to see changes if you don't show. You know, there's a lot.
Yeah, and you got to do sometimes you got to do the boring stuff to help get better at the more impressive stuff, right? Like we make people do a lot of simple mobility drills that, you know, it's tedious and boring, but you know, sometimes you got to just do those in order to really hit the bigger picture things that you can be proud of.
It has to happen. I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if people want to,
I don't do it enough.
I'm the same. I'm the same. I don't want to talk about that, but because I would, yeah, it's easy to forget if you don't have someone to hold you accountable. So I need someone to hold me accountable to it as well.
Exactly.
If people want to see more from you and learn more about you all, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, innercityweightlifting.org has like everything. It has our annual report, which kind of goes into more depth of those metrics that I was explaining, like the impact that we have.
Yeah.
And then it also has, I mean, hell, this is one of those rare occasions where if you don't live in Boston, you can still train with us. We're doing virtual training. We've actually grown a little bit since all this because of that, made up for some of the people that stopped coming in with the virtual kind of made up for it. So if you work for a company that you know, has the budget for wellness stuff, we work with a ton of companies and we lead group workouts for them by the trainers that I described. And our Instagram is probably the most like taken care of social media platform. So it's innercity _ weightlifting. And that kind of gives like updates on ways to engage and introduces you to some of our staff and trainers. Sure. So yeah, those are kind of the main things. And then, you know, other than that, yeah, I don't know.
Those are two good places. Yeah. So I think people should reach out, check you out, reach out. And like you said, this moment in time might be better than ever to make connections virtually and start from there. So yeah, thank you once again. We will definitely stay in touch. And if you need anything from me or us, we support your work, man. So
yeah, no, I like any interest in what we're doing, especially someone like you that has a platform and a following, we're so grateful for, just because you know, even though we have a really respected model, it doesn't, our story and our impact doesn't necessarily get out there without help from people like you. So I really appreciate it.
Dude, I'm more than happy to do it. And I highly encourage people to check out more from you and Inner City Weightlifting for sure.